We're going to look at pressure points on the body. Pressure points on the body tend to be the same points that an acupuncturist may use if you went to see them regarding a health issue you may have. If you lived in China, often if you went to a doctor, even nowadays, most of the prescriptions they would give you would be for something on the lines of traditional Chinese medicine, which would be something probably to do with acupuncture. In that situation, they would put needles in certain points in your body to manipulate the body's energy to help the body heal itself. In the situation we're using these points in, we're using it to inflict pain on the person and cause a reaction which is much more overt than you may expect from the amount of power we're putting in. The pressure points we're looking at will tend to be very small. People often think pressure points can be as big as this, but actually they're very, very small, about 1 millimetre by 1 millimetre. The location has to be correct, and in the same respect we also need to get the direction and the angle of the power that we're putting into that point to get the most effect out of it. Otherwise it will become from excruciatingly painful and it will become a mild annoyance instead. The first point we're going to look at is called large intestine 4. The large intestine channel runs down the arm and up and into the face. It doesn't really matter in this instance why it's called large intestine 4. It is the fourth point on the large intestine channel. However, this point is found in the first dorsal interosseous muscle, this muscle here, and what we're going to do is we're going to feel down this bone, the second metacarpal bone. We're going to find a little notch in that bone. Just as we run down there, there's a small notch. The direction I'm going to push in is actually just under the bone and into the hand as if I'm coming out this way. When I push in here, you can see it's quite a reaction. However, if I push about 0.5 centimetre further into the muscle, it doesn't do anything. If I go back to this point where I was, and I find that point, I can then create quite a lot of pain again. There's nothing else I'm doing apart from changing the location. For this point, large intestine 4, probably the most effective technique is if he's grabbed me or he's put his hand on me, what I'm going to do is just put my middle finger on this point, my middle finger being my strongest finger, and I'm just going to put that pressure into there. It causes quite a massive reaction. If I just pick another random point, say here, which is near, probably within 0.5 centimetre of this pressure point, it's annoying, and you can see he moves slightly and I almost scratch him with my nail, but it doesn't really do a great deal. The closer I get to this point, the more reaction it has. So as I push that in and I get accurate on that point, it will make a big difference. And you can see immediately what happens to his posture. So the point is found midway down the second metacarpal bone in the edge of the first dorsal interosseous muscle here. I feel down, there's a slight dent in the bone, and I push in there just under the bone, and I cause quite a reaction as soon as I push in, even though I'm only using one finger. So slide down there, find the dip, and just push between the muscle and the bone. The next point we're going to look at is large intestine 11. The large intestine goes down the arm and it's going to run through. If you were to bend his arm, you'd get to the end of this crease here. What I'm going to do is keep my thumb there, and I'm going to feel down until I can feel where the extensor muscles insert at the end of the tendons into the bone just here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to manipulate the end of those tendons. Now those tendons don't like to be rolled because they've got nerve bundles running around them. And as I push into that, if I just push them to one side, you can see exactly what happens with my thumb. Now, I can hit this point from a number of angles. if he's put his hand here, I can reach underneath and pull his arm across. Or I can use my thumb there and just draw him down. The advantage with using this is it manipulates his elbow. If I can push in there, I can make him move, and then obviously I can change his posture, push his head back and sweep him. As soon as his head goes behind his hips, he's very easy to push over, which means large intestine 11 is quite a good point to use. I just do that and he'll turn offline. The advantage with doing that, because I'm pushing there, this will take this hand away from being able to attack me. If I do this, he'll turn his body away. That means that he's not going to hit me with this, and he's probably not going to hit me with anything else, because he's turned away, which means that I can hit him if I want to. So, from this position, what we've already done is looked at large intestine 4 here, and we've also looked at large intestine 11 here. So, if I squeeze them both, I get an even stronger reaction, because both of these points will couple together on the large intestine channel to block the energy flow of this channel. So, to look at this again, what I want to do is find the end of this elbow crease. Open his arm out. I want to put my finger roughly where that was, and I'll feel a soft area, and just next to that I'll feel some tendons. And I want to put the pressure just into those tendons and just roll the tendons away, like this. And you can see every time I do it, he twitches because it hurts. I'd also use that with large intestine 4, and again I'd use my middle finger and I'd use the tip of it to push into that point. In the same respect, I can use the tip of my thumb probably being the strongest in terms of being able to drive into that point, just there. So to find the point, flex the elbow completely, slide down to the end of this crease. As I open the arm out, my thumb will drop into a hollow. What I need to do is I need to feel for where I can find the insertion of the tendons. If he wiggles his fingers, what you can see as I do that, you can see these muscles moving. Where those tendons insert is just where I've put my thumb. The muscles come down, they're attached by tendons onto the bone, and they're attached just there. And that's where the point is. And you can see if I put some pressure in there, immediately it hurts. And obviously if he wiggles his finger as I do this, he'll stop wiggling his fingers because it hurts. We've looked at large intestine 11, which is on the lateral elbow crease here. And now what we're going to do is look to the other side, and we're going to look to the inside. Now, on the medial elbow crease, on the inside of the arm, when his arm's fully flexed, I'm going to put my thumb there. What I'm going to do is I can feel, as I open and close his arm, I feel it pushes out and I can feel there's nothing there. As I bend this, a gap appears. That little gap is heart 3. That's on the heart channel. The heart channel runs down the inside of the arm and then into here. Now, what I'm going to do with this point is I'm going to grip it as if I was holding a brandy glass. I'm going to grip like this. I'm just going to put pressure into there, and I can, again, manipulate his elbow. If he was in this position, what I'd do, if he'd put his hand on me or had pushed me, I'd stabilise this here, and I'd come into there, where I know that point is, and I'd draw his elbow this way. You can see immediately now I'm behind him, which puts me at a tactical advantage in terms of fighting. I just push into there, pull this across, and now I'm in this position, which gives me a lot of advantages in terms of taking his head, takedowns, pulling him off balance, or striking. So, to find this again, fully flex the elbow, tip of the medial elbow crease, fill in there, and as you open and close, you'll feel a gap appear and disappear. At about 100 degrees or so, 110, 120 degrees, you'll feel the point just appear there. And you can see, if I push in, I get an instant reaction from him, which means it tells me that I know exactly that I'm on the point. So, completely flex the arm, put the thumb at the end, the tip of the thumb at the end of the medial elbow crease. As you open it out, a dip will appear. When I get to about between 90 and 120 degrees, my thumb will fall into a point, and you can see I hit a ridge, and then just above that my thumb slides into a hole. As I push on that, that causes a lot of pain. That's heart 3. The next point we're going to look at is REN 17. Now, REN 17 is a very easy point to locate on a man. The REN channel is the conception channel, and it runs from the perineum all the way up to his chin. Now, this channel, the energy is running up, and what I want to do is prevent that energy from running up his body. It's also, REN 17 is the collection area, in Chinese medical terms, is the collection area of all the qi that's in his chest. So it's basically his lungs and his heart energy. Now, the easiest way to find this is I take a line from where I think his nipples are, across to the midline, bisect those two, and I get a point here. Also, on a young person, there is typically, this is where the sternum closes. So just as the fontanelle on a baby closes, so does the sternum. Often, there is a weak point in the sternum here where the cartilage hasn't quite joined. What I'm going to do with this is all I need to do is take the tip of my thumb like this, and I just push into this point. Now, as I push, it hurts a lot, which means that if I say to him, I want you to push as hard as you can into me using your body, he won't push very hard. He won't push very hard at all, because it is a really painful point. The easiest way to use this point is if someone's in front of you, essentially threatening you, if you can put your hand here, all you need to do is use this point and just push back into them. So I can just use my thumb. If I had a pen, I could use a pen or any sort of biro or something like that. All I need to do is I need to know roughly where that line is. And then all I do is just drive back in. On a woman, it is where it's in line with the 4th rib space. So therefore, it's on the same place, but obviously, if a woman's wearing bra, it may be different. But you're still looking for this line that bisects the central line of the body with the line of the nipple, which is in line with the 4th rib space. If I actually have control of him, the other way to do it is actually to hold here. Now, I won't do it because it hurts, but what I'll do is, all I do is just hold him there and then just put a lot of pressure into him. If we're on the floor, I could also restrain him, but most of the time, the way this is used is just to shove people away. I don't need a lot of power to do it. I don't have to be very big. I don't have to be very strong. It hurts, and it hurts almost everyone. So, REN 17, or conception vessel 17, is found on the centre line of the body. I'm going to take a line across from his nipple, and it's just there. It's also in the 4th rib space. Once I've found this point, I may feel there's a slight depression in the sternum. And then all I do is I just put pressure into that point, and that'll hurt. I can do that with something solid. I can use my finger, or I can use a pen, or I can use something bigger, anything that I have to hand. We've spoken about percussive hits already. Now, the next point we're going to look at is REN 14. So it's below REN 17. What I'm going to feel for is I'm going to feel for where the rib cage ends. I'm going to come down and I'm going to find the xiphoid process, which is this part that just sticks down below your rib cage. Just below that that's REN 15, we've got REN 14 and REN 13. Now, those points essentially are where the energy is coming up into the lungs. Now, the angle of these points in terms of striking is down and in. Now, although he may have a very strong abs. So I can hit him like this and it won't hurt. When I hit Ren 14 and Ren 13 with a downward 45-degree angle, that's typically where the energy is just coming up into the diaphragm. So when I hit him with this, I'm going to use a percussive hit because I want the energy to go in. I don't want to push back into him. So essentially when I hit, I'm going to skim this off here. So I'm only going to do this once. When I hit in, he's going to go there. Oh yeah! And it tends to take the wind right out of him. It's not a comfortable place to be hit, and it tends to take all the wind out of your diaphragm. So this point lies, take the rib cage. If I looked at his belly button, I'd go just above 2/3 of the way up. And that's where I'm going to strike in. I'm going to strike in with my knuckles at a 45-degree angle downwards. And it tends to take the wind out of him, tends to hurt his diaphragm. If you put this in hard, he probably won't be able to get up. So, Ren 14 is again found on this centre line of the body. If I find the base of his rib cage, and also if I was to find his belly button, I'm going to come up about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up. It's going to be just as his abdominal muscles start. Now when I strike this point, I want to strike about a 45-degree angle down. As I hit this point, what it tends to do is put pressure just on the base of the diaphragm as it folds in and down, so it can pull the lungs down. As I hit that, it means that his diaphragm will stop working, and the energy coming up this vessel won't come up into his chest, which makes it hard for him to breathe. So when I hit, I want to use a percussive hit, like we've spoken about earlier. When I hit down onto those, and I almost want to smear it down. I don't want to hit in like this. If you hit perpendicular, you won't block the energy coming up. I need to hit down the channel. If I hit down the channel, it will stop a lot of the energy coming up and it hurts a lot more. The next point we're going to look at is stomach 9. So stomach 9 is found, if you take the base of his Adam's apple and you come across and you find his sternocleidomastoid muscle, this muscle here, just between there and there, you'll feel in and you can feel his carotid artery. You'll feel the pulse of it. To the inside of that is his carotid sinus. Now his carotid sinus monitors the blood pressure going up into his brain, and it tells his heart how much blood pressure is coming up into his head and how much pressure is in his head. This means when he sits down, the pressure can lower in his heart and put less blood up into his head, and when he's standing up, the heart has to work harder to push blood in there. What we're going to do by manipulating this point is we're going to cause his brain to think that there's too much blood going into his head. It'll reduce the pressure, cause a lot of pain, and typically, well, eventually it will cause him to black out. Most of the time, the way I'm going to use this is either by striking it, and use the edge of my hand to strike it, which essentially will get a string of points across here, or I'm just going to drive the edge of my hand in here. Most of the time, the way I would use this is if he wasn't holding on, if I went for stomach 9, all that would happen, as soon as I move in, he would just move away from me. So I need to find a way to anchor him in. So if he puts his hand here on me, I'm going to bring this arm round, lock his arm up, and then I'm going to use stomach 9 here, just with one finger. I can use the edge of my hand in the same respect and lock his arm in, but essentially he won't leave because his arm's locked in. And I just want to lock it in like that. If I do that, I can then just force him down to the ground. If I do jam this in hard, or I strike it, you can cause damage to the carotid sinus. If you cause a lot of damage to the carotid sinus, it will cause probably serious damage to his head. So be very, very, very cautious if you're ever tempted to hit this point here. In mixed martial arts, when they choke people out, they squeeze sideways like this on the neck, and they squeeze on these 2 points, on stomach 9 on both sides. As they squeeze across, they cause the person to black out by causing less blood flow to the head. What happens initially is the brain thinks that there's a lot of blood going into the head because of the pressure on this point here. Then what happens, the heart stops pumping blood, you get vasodilation, all the arteries dilate, less blood goes into the brain, and the person passes out. And if you watch any mixed martial arts, you'll see people, once they're caught in this position, they'll only take about 3 or 4 seconds to choke out. And they'll just begin to go a bit faint. You just squeeze it on, and essentially they'll just go limp. So, stomach 9 is found at the lower edge of the Adam's apple. I'm going to come across just anterior to the sternocleidomastoid muscle. You'll feel a dip in here, and you can feel the pulse of the carotid artery. Behind that, I can push in, and what I'm going to do is cause quite a lot of pain, and I'm going to adjust the pressure of blood going into his head by manipulating the carotid sinus. So essentially, I'm going to go under his Adam's apple and into this gap here. As I push in there, I'm going to manipulate that point. Do not strike this point, because if you do, you will cause serious damage to the person. Serious damage, and you could even kill them, because it will adjust the amount of blood going into their brain. And they could black out, and they could remain blacked out. We're now going to look at stomach 12. Stomach 12 is on the mid-clavicular line. So here's his clavicle, or shoulder bone, or collarbone, sorry. If you go from the midline and you come out across his collarbone, midway across that, if you feel along on the inside of the bone, you'll feel a point where there's a ridge in the bone. Once you've found that ridge, which is roughly midway, and it's probably roughly in line with his nipple, what you're going to do, you'll find a dip in the bone. What I'm going to do is reach over that into this supraclavicular fossa, which is just this hole behind his collarbone. All I'm going to do is reach in and put most of the pressure on that point. What a lot of people do is grab the whole area and use it like a handle. But I don't want to do that. I just want to come to this point and put a lot of pressure in. It tends to be a lot more painful than if I just try and grab onto the whole area, where he can probably resist, whereas as soon as I go to one finger, it'll hurt a lot more. Because I'm focusing all my pressure into one point. Typically, this is great if he's come in to grab me like this. I can use this side, or I can use this side. Personally, I find it easier to come across to the opposite side and pull this down and into me. Hook behind it and squeeze into that notch in the bone. It tends to be really painful, and it's good for pulling him out of the way. At which point I can knee him, or attack him, punch him, or do whatever I like to him. So, stomach 12 is on the mid-clavicular line. If I take his clavicle, come to the midpoint, there's a small notch in the bone there. As I reach in, that notch, I just come behind and hook into it. Using my middle finger, I apply pressure to the back of the bone there. We're now going to look at Do 26. Now, Do 26 is just here. It's where his midway up, about 2/3 of the way up from his bottom lip, on his philtrum, just under his nose. Now, this point is typically used as a rub point. It means essentially, as I rub it, it causes quite a lot of pain. Now, it's also at the root of the top teeth, where the root and the teeth join the gum, just at the root of the tooth. So, as I push in, it causes quite a lot of pain. I'm not going to do it too hard. What will happen, he will naturally bring his head back and away. The most effective way to use this point is from someone strangling you or restraining you in that way. What I'm going to do is bring my hands up the inside. I'm going to put one hand on the back of his head, and put one hand here. So, if we had a squeezing competition of who moves first, as he tries to choke me out, squeeze, squeeze, he moves first. All I do is put that pressure on, drive it in, and just vibrate it side to side slightly, and it causes a lot of pain into the root of the nerves of the teeth. It tends to be really painful. It's where is midway up, about 2/3 of the way up from his bottom lip on his philtrum, just under his nose. As I push in, it causes quite a lot of pain. I'm not going to do it too hard. What will happen, he will naturally bring his head back and away. The point we're going to now look at is small intestine 16. Small intestine 16 is found midway on the sternocleidomastoid muscle, which is this muscle here in his neck. What we're going to do is going to actually pinch that point. This tends to be really painful, and it doesn't matter how developed the muscle is. The more overdeveloped the muscle, typically the easier it is to find and the easier it is to manipulate. So, what I'm going to do is we're going to just find the anatomy first. So, if we turn his head this way, you can see the sternocleidomastoid comes down, it splits at the bottom there. What I'm going to do is come up, and midway on here, in the body of the muscle, is the point. Now what we're going to do is actually we're going to squeeze either side of that and just get hold of the muscle. So, as he grips in, say he strangles or he's grabbed or whatever he's doing, what I'm going to do is just reach in and just squeeze that. What I'm trying to do is I realise the point is deep within the muscle. So I squeeze either side to get to that point. And I can squeeze just with the tips of my fingers, but obviously as soon as I squeeze, he moves that way. So what I first need to do is I need to block him from moving that way. So as I do that, I squeeze in, and then what he'll do, instead of just moving sideways, this way and away from me, what he's going to do is going to drop down and into me. So I go there, and he drops down and in, and now what I can do is I can just grip him, turn him around, throw him down. And if he grabs my leg, I'll stamp on him. So, this one again, midway in the body of the sternocleidomastoid, I'm going to put my hand there on his head, and then I'm just going to pinch in that and bring his head down into me. At this point, I can either manipulate his head, turn him around, and throw him on the floor, or I can use my knees to start kneeing him in the rib cage, which obviously is going to be really painful for him and probably end up in some cracked ribs. If I bring him lower, I can knee him in the face as well. So small intestine 16 is found on this muscle, the sternocleidomastoid. What I'm going to do is I'm going to feel up until I feel where the two branches, the anterior and the posterior branches, have come together. They're going to come together around here. As I push in, you can feel that he's going to move. What I do then is go either side of that and squeeze into the posterior medial side of this muscle. And as I put this pressure in, he's going to curve round into me, and that allows me to manipulate his head and or strike the legs with the knees or to the body with my knees. We're going to look at gallbladder 21 in conjunction with triple burner 15. Now gallbladder 21 is just on the anterior edge of his trapezius muscle here. Where his t-shirt is, you can see the seam which is right at the top. I'm just going to come slightly to the front of that. And it's midway between his spine and where his shoulder joint is. As you come there, it'll be around here. If he was to wear a bra, which I'm sure he doesn't, it would be on that line. What I'm going to do is just push into there. Now, on its own, you need to have manipulated him to a certain position where you can use it. However, the other point we're going to use in conjunction with this is triple burner 15, which is directly behind it on the posterior edge. And so what I'm going to do is come from the front and the back of his trapezius muscle. This tends to be really painful and is really good for manipulating his body to make him move in whichever way I want him to move. And typically he's going to go downwards. So I can do that just by resting my hand on his shoulder here, And all I do is put my hand there, and I guess this line, which is going to be halfway, probably closer to his neck, through his shoulder, probably about a third from his neck down towards his shoulder. And I'd reach in, come under his trapezius muscle, this big shoulder muscle here, squeeze in, and he'll move down straight away. The other way to use this, as we've already used large intestine 4 and large intestine 11, I've come to here, I turn him there, and I'm going to reach over to gallbladder 21, and down, and I can just pull him straight down to the floor. It's also a good point to use if I decided I don't want him to walk forwards. So if he's walking forwards like this, and I don't want him to, I can always stop him from doing so by using gallbladder 21. All I do is just push the tip of my finger into it, and move him back, and he'll move straight back into me. You'll see he'll rotate and drop back in. At this point, if I did want to take his head, that would give me quite a big advantage. So, these 2 points are found midway between the spine here and the AC joint here, which is what you'd think of as the shoulder joint, just here. I find that midpoint, and just anterior to that, on this muscle body, is gallbladder 21. To the back here is triple burner 15. If I squeeze in, I can push the body of the muscle up. And it's on the underside of this muscle where I'm squeezing in. For gallbladder 21, it's just there as I push in. Taking this midpoint and come in, and for triple burner 15, it's just posterior to that, directly through the muscle. So if I manipulate them together, my fingers should just meet in the middle, through the trapezius muscle. We're now going to look at a point which is actually not on a channel. It's considered to be one of the extra points in acupuncture, and it is at the root of, if we bring his lips down a bit, you can see his lower canine. We'll come to the bottom of that, and just where I can feel the root of it, there is a tiny hole in the bone, which is called a foramen, and it's where the facial nerve that controls this area comes out and controls this part. Again, this is a rub point or a strike point. What it does is, when I put pressure on this point, it tends to cause the face here to relax. Initially, it doesn't seem like a point that really does much, because you can hit it, you can rub it. What it does though, it causes this muscle, this temporomandibular muscle, which is essentially this muscle here, to relax. So, as he shuts his mouth, when I squeeze this in, and I squeeze it in hard, you see his natural reaction is to open his mouth to take that pressure off. As he opens his mouth, his jaw will relax, and as his jaw relaxes, this muscle and joint will stretch. As that stretches, and his mouth, his jaw essentially begins to dislocate sideways like this, what will happen, to prevent damage to his jaw, his sternocleidomastoid muscle will relax. So as I do that, that will allow me to turn his head. Once I turn his head, you can see at this point he's fine. But if you watch his posture as I turn more, his posture changes. Because we've now got to the limit where his head will turn, when I push any further, his whole structure changes. So essentially, from the very small beginning of me putting pressure here, relaxing this muscle, that causes the sternocleidomastoid to relax, and that causes the rest of the muscles in his body to relax. Which means, from somewhere like this, he's grabbed on, all I need to do is put pressure here and drive into this point, and he'll relax his whole body to get his jaw away. In the same respect, I can hit it, and if I hit it, it'll do exactly the same thing. It'll relax his jaw and turn his head round. There is a tiny hole in the bone, which is called a foramen, And it's where the facial nerve that controls this area comes out and controls this part. Again, this is a rub point or a strike point. We're now going to look at triple burner 17. This is probably one of the most well-known pressure points, but is actually often done incorrectly because people don't quite realise how it's supposed to be used. It works incredibly well with this mental point that we've already spoken about. Triple burner 17 is just behind the ear, well, behind the ear, just at the base of the earlobe. Essentially, it's near the mastoid, and it's between the temporomandibular joint and the mastoid process, which is this lump here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to manipulate this mental point at the root of this lower canine, and I'm going to manipulate this point. What I want to do is I want to put pressure from both of them into each other. What this will cause is it will cause his lower jaw to relax and him to turn his head, which allows me to manipulate him. This tends to be a really, really painful point, which is why it's used so often. All I need to do is grab up here, and what I do is squeeze these two together, and immediately he'll just drop straight down. The advantage is, with using these 2 points together, is it means I can get a great deal of movement from him. Probably one of the most useful ways I use this, if he's grabbed here, if he's grabbed anywhere on me, what I do is anchor one arm. As I anchor this, I'm going to turn, put my foot here. Now at first he's going to think that's quite strange, until when I do this, he's basically going to try and walk round, and he's going to walk straight into my leg and fall over. The other way to use this is if you're near to a wall. So, if we're near a wall, what I would do is I would anchor this in the same way. I'd tilt this and I'd drive the top of his head into the wall. He won't be able to prevent this happening because this is not a reaction that he actually wants to do. This is just a pain response which makes his nerves move in such a way, relaxes his body, so I can slam the back of his head straight into a wall. So if he has pinned me against a wall and the wall was here, all I need to do is just do that, and I'll bang his head, the top of his head, straight into a wall and probably knock him out. You don't need strength. All you need to do is make sure you can reach between these 2 points here. If you can't reach this first one and that one, go for this one. And then just use his nose, essentially, to lever that power against it. So, where you find this is at the base of the earlobe, and you want to come in diagonally in towards the front of the face and this lower canine on the opposite side of the face. From here down to here, and manipulate that pressure. You don't need to put your whole hand in there. Again, with all pressure points, it's a small point. You just need one finger. Triple burner 17 is just behind the ear. Well, behind the ear, just at the base of the earlobe. Essentially, it's near the mastoid and between the temporomandibular joint and the mastoid process, which is this lump here. The next point we're going to look at is spleen 6. Now, as with all the other pressure points, we've looked at the upper half of the body. We're now going to look at the lower half of the body. Spleen 6, to get a good idea, is if I look at this ankle bone, which is his medial malleolus, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand like this. From the height of this, I'm going to reach over and I'm going to find where his bone and his muscle meet. So where the tibia meets the muscle. Now at this point, initially you may find a slight dent. You may not. But in which case all you need to do is think, well, my hand's about the same size as his. It's going to be 4 fingers width up, and it's going to be just in there. It tends to be a really painful point. Most of the time you'll use this point because when I'm in a weakened position and he may be standing in front of me or he's like this. What I'm going to do is reach down onto his ankle and put a lot of pressure in here. Now typically I'm going to use this with another spleen point, which is going to be spleen 10, which is in the body of his vastus medialis here. What I'm going to do is just push into that. That's not going to do much without this, but it will allow me to manipulate his knee, which will cause him to fall over. So if I push in there, spleen 10, at the same time as I push into spleen 6, I'll be able to bring his leg down to the ground. All I need to do is anchor this when I put this pressure in. So if he's standing in front of me, all I need to do is put pressure into this point, spleen 6, anchor into spleen 10, and then I can bring him straight down to the ground. The one thing I need to watch out for is this foot, because obviously he's probably naturally going to kick me straight back. So, when I use this, what I may do is use the forearm. For example, this may be a situation where he's gone to kick me with this leg. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my forearm and I'm going to rub this point, I'm going to anchor his ankle with my hand here, and I'm just going to rub that in with my forearm, with this bone here. Just drive it in and rub it backwards and forwards. And what that will do is it will bring him to the ground. So if he's tried to kick me and I'm on the ground here, he's got up, you're up, and he's kicked me, what I can do is just control this leg briefly and just drive that in and grind it down. Now I can get up while he's down. And roles are reversed. It's a great point also if he's kicked me and I've caught his leg. So he's gone to kick, I've caught his leg, and I don't really know what to do. At this point, if he's grabbed my head or something like that, and I don't really know what to do, if I use spleen 6, what he'll tend to do is just let go. So for example, if I had long hair, and he had grabbed my hair, but I had his foot, what we'd find is we're kind of in a stalemate until I find spleen 6. I'm going to cushion his leg so he can't move it, I'm going to drive this in, and essentially just push him down to the ground. And he'll be quite keen to hit the ground, because it does hurt. So, I'm going to take the height of this bone here. I'm going to put my hand there, and I'm going to just come to the top of there, where the bone and the muscle meet. Just there. And I'll find that there's a slight dip in there. If I get the point right, I'll get an instant reaction with him moving as I just push this in. Tends to be a really sensitive point. It can also be used for kicking, if you want to kick the lower leg here. But most of the time it's used where I'm on the floor and he's already kicked me. So he's trying to kick me, and all I've done is I've managed to take hold of this, and all I do is put some pressure in, stabilise the knee, and then he'll just drop down. Now, pressure points can be used in conjunction with one another. I'm going to show you a sequence you could use. Typically, you wouldn't use all of these at the same time. However, it's quite convenient to help you remember where some of the points are and how they can be used together. So, to begin with, the hand starts there. I'm going to reach over to large intestine 4. I'm going to come under to large intestine 11. Pull that across. I'm then going to come into heart 3. Pull his body across. I'm going to reach round into this mental point here. Push into there. Bring his face across. What I'm going to do then is come this midpoint where his nipples are, drive that in, and just push him down. We're going to run through that one again. Large intestine 4, large intestine 11, heart 3, the mental point at the base of this tooth, and then I'm going to go for round 17 and just push him down onto the floor. We're going to do another version of this, where I'm going to use large intestine 4, large intestine 11, heart 3. I'm going to reach over for gallbladder 21, but I'm not going to use small intestine 15. I'm just going to squeeze into gallbladder 21, and then I'm going to switch sides, and I'm going to come into stomach 12, and just push him straight down to the ground. So once again, large intestine 4, large intestine 11, heart 3, gallbladder 21, stomach 12, straight down. So I'm going to do that one more time. We're going to add in 2 more points. So I'm going to go large intestine 4, large intestine 11, heart 3, gallbladder 21, stomach 12. As he drops down at this point, he's going to drop down here. I'm going to grip onto both triple burner 17s. Bring his head up, and then I'm going to leave him at that because it'll hurt. But it shows you that you can use multiple points throughout the attack to manipulate. Typically, his arms are crossed, his head, I can bring him down, I can bring him up, and I can move him to where I want to. If I wanted to, after doing this, cross onto here, then bring him back up, I could also then use spleen 6 to take the weight off his foot and kick him in here. If I get this point right, this will actually bruise up his whole entire leg. It tends to be really painful and very good for inside leg sweeps. But essentially, you wouldn't really use multiple points together, but you may well use large intestine 4, large intestine 11, and then you may well use gallbladder 21, just pull down. Or from here, from this grab here, you may well anchor onto stomach 12 and then go for triple burner 17 and this mental point here. Anchor them both together. It just shows you that you can use lots of these points together. You can also use 2 at the same time, so I can use both large intestine 11s, I can use both large intestine 4s at the same time, and I can use triple burner 17s, both stomach 12s, I can use Ren 17. But most of these points can be used quite easily and are quite well within range and easy for me to use, even if he's bigger and stronger than I am.